here on the news desk. A lot of this stuff is from my personal files, and it's quite old. I've been carrying these things around with me, particularly in the 1990s, as I was speaking all over the country. After my third book in 1995, Reclaiming a Nation at Risk, came out. This is a certificate of mastery. I'll show you a closer up picture tonight on camera. This is dated 1994. It was the first certificate of mastery ever given out in the United States in Cottage Grove, Oregon. The student whose name is on here, I worked with their mother and other mothers throughout not only just Oregon, but the country, as we were warning about certificates of mastery. But not only were they going to be for students, I warned that they were going to be for everyone. Even in my book in 1993, I warned about government centers that would be for everybody, including babies. That's what Lamar Alexander said, Secretary of Education for George H. Bush. So for several decades now, we've been warning we're headed toward a system that is really based on what China does, a Dangan, a file opened on each child when they're born and enter school, and it follows them through their whole life. Their hiring, firing, job promotions, and ability to travel is based on review of an applicant's Dangan. I quoted that in my book in 1995. So that brings us to today. Keir Stormer, when he said this today, I was not at all surprised. We knew it was coming. But do you understand what the real agenda is here, folks? I'm going to tell you, and I hope you'll alert your family and friends. Listen to what he said today, the Prime Minister of Great Britain.
I am announcing this government will make a new free-of-charge digital ID mandatory for the right to work by the end of this Parliament. Let me spell that out. You will not be able to work in the United Kingdom if you do not have digital ID. It's as simple as that. Because decent, pragmatic, fair-minded people, they want us to tackle the issues that they see around them. And of course, the truth is, we won't solve our problems if we don't also take on the root causes, looking upstream to tackle poverty, conflict.
Conflict, really, poverty. Of course, poverty is largely created in modern times by the government through the inflation of our currency, the debasement of our currency. Remember what John Maynard Keynes said? And by the way, I'm going to have on Anni Cyrus. I'm going to have on Dr. Moon. I'm going to have on Dr. Schreiner. So I have some guests coming up. But remember what John Maynard Keynes said. By this continuous process of inflation, we can steal the majority of the people's wealth, and not one man in a million will know what we're doing. They created the poverty. They created the immigration crisis, which created more crime. And now they say to get this immigration crisis under control, which people want, now they're going to offer up a solution. I warned about that in great detail in an hour-long broadcast in 2020 when the United Nations held an ID conference claiming with major corporations, the Bank for International Settlements, the World Bank, and many others, that they could get everybody with a digital ID, and that could help take care of the issue of illegal immigration and crime. They create the problem, then they offer the solution. But it's not about just immigration, the problem they've created. What it's about is globalism, no borders. You can go wherever you want as long as you're registered. It's also about being able to control people, control your money, control your speech, control your ability to travel. If you thought censorship, deplatforming, shadow banning was a big deal during COVID, we have not seen anything yet. Because once they complete their ultimate goal, which they tell you, this is not conspiracy, we have the videos, the papers, they're going to control your money, what you can spend, when you can spend, and whether you can even access your money. Don't forget, it just came out this week that 86 million bank accounts disappeared in Vietnam this week. This is all a part of Agenda 21, now known as Agenda 2030, and Goal 16.9, to get everyone in the world registered. But I think it's setting up, in my opinion, theologically speaking, prophetically speaking, when it comes to the book of Daniel and Revelation, I think it's setting up the mark of the beast system. So Keir Starmer comes out, and by the way, Europe is generally almost always ahead of the U.S. Are we going to listen? Are we going to learn? What massive crisis are they going to use in America to get Americans to willingly surrender? Oh, and it'll be done in the name of safety and convenience. What's going to happen here? Are you ready for it now? Are you going to tell yourself, I'm not going to be manipulated. I'm not going to be afraid and frightened into surrendering my liberties, my autonomy? Better decide now. A talk show host in Great Britain challenged this whole thing. It's a great little exchange. But listen to what this lady finally says is the ultimate goal.
All UK citizens will have to have one. Well, the plan is that we're going to roll this out by the end of
No, my question is, what if I don't? What if I've got my job, so I don't need to show this to anyone? So what if I just don't do it?
So if you don't have one, then you'll have a problem if you want to get a new job.
No, I'm saying I'm not doing that. So I'm not seeking a job. So why should I get the digital ID card? Why do I do it? Well, is there some fine for not doing it? Is there an incentive to do it? I'm just thinking I've got no reason to do it.
Yeah, look, this isn't a heavy-handed approach. We're not planning to go around finding people. But what we are going to do is make sure that everybody's got one. In the same way, Charlie, as you've got a national insurance number, if you're a citizen of this country, we'll make sure that everybody has a digital ID.
So help me with this. I know we're plotting through this, but so everyone watching who's got a job has got a national insurance number. So when these digital ID cards exist, if I just go to my employer and show them my national insurance number, is that not sufficient? Are they being precluded from employing me?
It won't be sufficient. I just want to be really clear about that.
So they can't employ people unless they've seen a digital ID.
Cards. Yes, that's right. That is the plan. And the major benefit of that to the entirety of the UK is that we will therefore be able to disrupt the illegal market where people come to this country and work illegally and undercut British workers who could otherwise get those jobs.
Well, national insurance number would have the same effect, because if you're illegal, you can have one of those.
Well,
So again, they created the illegal immigration crisis, and now we want to protect the worker, so everybody has to get one. We're not going to fine you, she says, but you won't be able to get a job. You won't be able to keep your job. Well, the Reform UK Party, Nigel Farage, he has something to say about this today. Listen to this.
So the Prime Minister says we must have digital ID. That's the way we'll stop illegal immigration. Well, think about it. Germany has ID cards, strict ID and checks. It's made no difference at all in Germany, and nor will it here. All that digital ID will be is a means of controlling the population, of telling us what we can and can't do, of fining the innocent. And didn't we see it all when we had the pandemic, when you had to have vaccine ID to travel, to do various things? Did that stop the COVID pandemic spreading? Did it? Hell, all it did was put cost and inconvenience on everybody else. I also worry about massive data banks being held by the government, being hacked by foreign governments, by private companies, by criminals. I do not see a single benefit to the government having digital ID other than them controlling what we do, what we spend, and where we go. And we, in Reform, are wholly opposed to it in every single way.
And don't forget, these large data centers, folks, these large data centers are not about AI and how convenient it's going to be, all the great fun stuff you can do. These large data centers are for digital IDs, social credit scores, tracking you, digital currency. It's where we're going. Here is a video. This guy's with the Bank for International Settlements that I'm going to play a clip from. I've been talking about the Bank for International Settlements also for many decades. It's the central bank of central bankers. All the central banks of the industrialized world belong. And if you remember Carol Quigley, who wrote the book in 1966, if I remember correctly off the top of my head, Somebody look that up for me. Carol Quigley's book, Tragedy and Hope. Was that published in 1966? He was a professor at Georgetown. He taught Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton gave him a shout out in one of his Democratic acceptance speeches. 1966, your old man got it, didn't he? Still like a steel trap, isn't it, boys? And Carol Quigley, he said, at the center of the globalism would be the Bank for International Settlements. Well, try to cut through this guy's accent if you can, and then I'll tell you what he's saying. He's with the Bank for International Settlements. And the central bankers tell you something, you might want to listen. This is a little older clip, but it sure fits with today's conversation. Stable coins, cryptocurrency, central bank digital dollars. Listen to this.
All our analysis on CBDC in particular,
Okay, CBDCs.
the use of general use, we tend to establish the equivalence with cash. And there is a huge difference there.
Between cash and central bank digital currencies. You know what the difference is? Control. Listen.
For example, in cash, we don't know, for example, who's using a $100 bill today. We don't know who is using a 1,000 peso bill today.
We don't know who's using that $100 bill. When we have a CBDC, central bank digital currency, versus a dollar bill, a $100 bill, well, they're not the same because we don't know who just spent that $100 bill. It's about control, folks. Let's go back to it.
A key difference with the CBDC is that central bank will have absolute control.
Oh, the central bank will have absolute control. And isn't that what everybody longs for? The banksters have absolute control. No, of course they don't. But he just told you. And yet, it doesn't matter how many footnotes I've put in my books. People have for years said it's conspiracy theories. And yet these people say it openly. We don't know who's spending that $100. But when we have a central bank digital currency, we know. And we, the central bankers, have control.
On the rules and regulations that will determine the use of that expression of central bank liability.
Okay, what did he just say with that disgusting thick accent? All the rules that we determine. Listen again.
On the rules and regulations that will determine the use of that expression of central bank liability.
All the rules and regulations that we determine is what's going to allow you to use that. Do you want this man deciding whether you have money, whether you can spend it, where you can spend it? You want guys like this setting up a system when they don't like what you've said, they can fine you and take the money out of your account, and good luck trying to get it back? You think you have a problem with your local, state, and federal government now, and the red tape and the constant mail that you get from local, state, and federal government, particularly if you're a business owner? Any of you business owners? Any of you sick and tired of the constant mail you get from local, state, and federal government? Red tape? The licenses? We used to be a free society. And today you have to have a stinking license for everything. I saw something the other day I thought was kind of interesting. There used to be this thing called liberty. And yet many of our liberties have been converted into requirements of a license. It's now not a liberty. It's now a privilege. And we'll decide whether or not we want you to have the privilege to fish. So you need a fishing license. We want to decide whether you have the privilege of hunting. So we will sell you a hunting license. This is all, folks, a way to control people and then to tax the living daylights out of them. Fishing license, hunting license, driver's license, a drones license, a barber license, a tattoo license, a massage license, a travel agent's license, a contractor license, a marriage license, a camping permit, construction permit, solar panel permit, street vendor permit, concealed carry permit, burn permit, protest permit, photography permit, vehicle registration fees, boating regulation fees, biking fees, building permit fees, parking meter fees, toll road fees, land use fees, firearm license fees, park entry fees, liquor license fees. So much for liberty. They will be able to control every aspect of you and set the rules and the regulations for everything you do. And you're either going to comply or we will just either take the money out of your account as a fine or just shut you down. Let's listen to what this guy with the Bank for International Settlements, which Carol Quigley said would be at the center of global governance, further says.
And also, we will have the technology to enforce that.
Okay, we're going to have the technology to enforce these rules and these regulations.
Those two issues are extremely important, and that makes a huge difference with respect to what cash is.
Yeah, the rules and the regulations make it very important as to what cash is. Cash versus central bank digital currencies. So today, when Keir Starmer announced for Great Britain what was coming, I wasn't shocked at all. This is what I've been shouting from the rooftops about since 1994. And then my book, 1995. Let me plug in another computer here. This is what I wrote in this book in 1995. Look at this. This is from the New York Times International, 1992. A file, talking about China, open on each urban citizen when he or she enters elementary school, and it shadows the person throughout life. Moving on to high school, college, employer. It's called a Dangan. The Dangan contains political evaluations that affect career prospects and permission to leave the country. The file is kept by one's employer. The Dangan affects promotions and job opportunity. Any prospective employer is supposed to examine an applicant's Dangan before making hiring decisions, end quote. Yeah. And by the way, there's a book written on this called From Family to Market, Labor Allocation in Contemporary China. Talks about everybody getting a Dangan opened on them. Personal revenge, false entries, and special favors are thus part of the game. How many of you live in an HOA? How many of you have run into your HOA Karens and bullies who have a personal revenge because you're a conservative or a Christian or a Trump supporter? Wait till these people have access to your digital ID. Because in China, the book said personal revenge and false entries and special favors is part of the game. Because a worker almost never gets to see his or her Dangan, bosses, through their access to it, acquire a tremendous and almost mystical power over their subordinates. Every state employee has to have a Dangan to be employed, transfer, or promoted. Wow, look at that. And you just heard the UK say today, without one, you're not getting a job. And then, of course, comes social credit scores, right? By the way, lest I remind you, and I pointed it out then, back in 2018, remember this article? DeVos, she was the Secretary of Education for President Trump in his first term, signed on the globalist UN education agenda. Grassroots parents call for her dismissal. Yeah. She put us right up underneath a European system, Betsy DeVos, with the G20 that included kids being forced to learn effective objectives, attitudes, values, feelings, and beliefs, that which was consistent with Agenda 21, Agenda 2030. Well, here's the Certificate of Mastery, the first one given out in the U.S. That is the very same Certificate of Mastery that's sitting here on my desk that I traveled all over the country with from 1994 all through the 90s and into the early 2000s, holding it up at one seminar after another, telling parents about this Certificate of Mastery. Today, it's not going to be on paper. It'll be a digital file. And I warned in this book in 95, it's not just for your child. It'll ultimately be for you if you don't wake up and stop the system. This will ultimately be for you as well. Now, many of the moms who helped me fight this all across the country and gave me so much of the information from my presentations and books, they believed me. But they were only about maybe, 1% of the population. The biggest obstacles we ran up against were many of the local churches. Some of the churches, they helped us. They had Christian schools. They believed us. They supported us. They were in agreement, and they would sponsor my seminars when these mothers would bring me to town to speak. The Christian schools would have me speak at their conferences. They would have me speak at their banquets for their Christian schools. They were totally tracking with me. Many of the Christian schools, many of them had churches that were attached to them or sponsored them, but that too was a very small percentage. And the biggest obstacle we ran up against when we would go to a town to try to educate the population were many of the churches that didn't want to talk about it. Because we have public school teachers in our congregation, we can't upset the Karens. But the superintendent, the school board members, they all go to our church. Well, isn't it going to be interesting to watch some of these same, now I'm not going to call them pastors because that would be offensive to the real pastors that were helping and alert and aware and fighting this. The hirelings, some of those hirelings, if they're still around, they're going to lose their jobs. Or maybe they won't. Maybe they'll actually keep their jobs because they are hirelings and will go along with the attitudes, values, feelings, and beliefs of the government. But we were trying to stop it being imposed on our kids. And we were warning people, they're starting with your children, but this is going to be for everyone. You doubt me? Go into my vault at worldviewtube.com/vault. Get this book. It's there as a PDF. You don't even have to buy it. It's at worldviewtube.com/vault. We have a lower third for that, guys. And you don't have to buy it. And you will see that I was warning, this is for every adult. What do we just see announced in the UK? You say, well, that's the UK, Brannon. Folks, it's coming here. Don't fool yourself. The UK is always ahead of us. What comes there comes here. So here's that certificate of mastery. And what did you have to prove? Effective objectives, constructive thinker, effective communicator, collaborative contributor, understands diversity, interprets human experience, because after all, it's all based on experience, not truth, right? Here's a little bit closer screenshot so you can see these effective objectives. I went to Chattanooga, Tennessee, was invited by the parents. Many of the so-called churches didn't want to help promote that I was coming to town. A lady named Helen in her 80s heard me on the radio on WDYN in Chattanooga, and they knew that one of Hillary Clinton's friends had been invited to town to pitch this idea to the school board. So they said, well, why not bring this Brannon Howse gentleman to town to offer the other alternative? I did, and 1,000 parents showed up. We have it on video. There's the Chattanooga Free Press. Schools here critique tonight. House blasts public education goals 2000. This is in 1996, March of 96. I was called all kinds of names. I was called an extremist, comparable to that of the Ku Klux Klan, the blacklisting of the 1950s. Who will be the next speaker that comes to town? A terrorist with a gun in his belt? I guess comparing me to Gaddafi. By the weekend, they were drawing cartoons of me, House of Fear. There's a part of me that's not going to feel too bad when this system comes into place and some of these people can't get a job, find themselves being herded like cattle because they will get exactly what they deserved. They continued to follow the PTA, the teachers' unions, the teachers, the Karens in your schools and community, telling you that people like me who are lifting up a shout were comparable to the Ku Klux Klan and the blacklisting of the 1950s. Part of me is going to enjoy, can I be honest, watching them get what they deserve. I'm very happy tonight we don't all get what we deserve by God's grace. But under equal weights and measures, some of these people are going to deserve to be punished that they stood by, no, not just stood by, were partakers in putting this system in. By mocking the moms, mocking the dads, mocking the grandparents, like Helen Smith was her name, the 80-year-old mom who said, well, let's bring Mr. Howse to town. Let him offer the alternative opinion. Here's a letter sent by a guy named Mark Tucker to Hillary Clinton right after Bill Clinton won the presidency in 1992 to be sworn in very soon. And this is all about developing human resource. It's about Mark Tucker. And there you see one of the people involved in this National Center on Education and the Economy was Hillary Clinton, along with the Speaker of the House in Oregon, which now helps you understand why Oregon was a test for the certificate of mastery. That is now going to be part of the digital ID. And I warned then that what is going to be set up is a system that stops people from getting a job. I have a video, and I talked about it back in the 90s. I have a video of then governor of Colorado, Roy Romer of Colorado. He was the chairman of this governor's association that was pushing all this. I have him on video saying, if the kids don't get a certificate of mastery, there'll be no job for them. There will be no life for them. What did you just hear coming out of the UK? And my friends, am I lifting up a shout of warning tonight to people whose ears cannot hear? Because I'm doing it again, as I have now for several decades, warning you what's coming. Are you educating your family and your friends? Are you saying to them, hey, listen to this guy. You don't have to agree with everything he says, but he's written a lot of books and done a lot of documentaries, and he has all the documentation to show us, and has been for several decades, going all the way back to 1995 with his book on this, that this was coming. We better get organized now as a group, as a community, to resist. Because I'm going to tell you something. Once they put this digital system in, you will be a slave. You will be easily controlled. For years, I gave this quote by the former Assistant Secretary of Education, Checker Finn, who worked with Bill Bennett, sadly. He said, quote, perhaps the best way to enforce this standard, talking about these education standards, these effective objectives, is to confer valuable benefits and privileges on people who meet it and to withhold them for those who do not. Work permits, good jobs, and college admission are the most obvious, but there is ample scope here for imagination and devising carrots and sticks. Driver's license could be deferred. So could eligibility for professional athletic teams. The minimum wage paid to those who earn their certificates of mastery might be $1 higher, end quote. Well, there you were. And I've been given that quote for years and years and years. And here we are. You better get a digital ID. There'll be no job for you. No travel. No bank account. You're not going to be able to even get online, social media. The World Economic Forum openly told us this. I've shown you the graphic going back to 2018. Yeah, I told you about Roy Romer, 1997, then governor of Colorado, serving as the Goals 2000 panel as a board member. This is what he said. Quote, I believe if you were to get all employers of this country saying that we would not hire anybody unless we see a high school graduate certificate that has on it the results of this potential employee's record, then I think this nation will come to the realization that there's no job for them, there's no life for them, there's the motivation, end quote. I've been giving that quote since 1997. I was watching it live on C-SPAN when he said it, and I videotaped it on VHS. Still have it. Still have the VHS. I watched it a couple months ago. You know what you call this when you merge education with industrial production? Called communism. It's the 10th plank of the Communist Manifesto. Go look it up. The 10th plank of the Communist Manifesto. Let me ask you something. Do you think we have elected officials at the highest levels of our federal government, down to your state government, down to your local government, that even know what the 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto are? Do you think they know that the 10th plank of the Communist Manifesto is the merging of education with industrial production? Do you think they know that a digital ID to get a job is what the Chinese do, and it's called a dangan? You know, the problem is we're led by people that don't have very much knowledge. They might be good salesmen. They might be good spokespersons. They might be successful business people, but that doesn't mean they're statesmen. That doesn't mean that they are learned people with wisdom and knowledge, reason, logic, context, which is why you see so many of them today chasing their tails around and around, flip-flopping like Guppy, double-minded, can never seem to stay the course because they don't understand history. They don't seem to understand what's going on and where we're going. Remember what Aldous Huxley said in his book, Brave New World. Look at this, quote, "A really efficient totalitarian state would be one in which the all-powerful executive political bosses, think local, state, federal government, and their army of managers control a population of slaves who do not have to be coerced because they love their servitude." Is that where we're going? Are they going to create a national crisis so great that people will surrender more and more liberties because they love their servitude, because they have been promised security and protection? Aldous Huxley went on to say, quote, "To bring about the revolution we require, enabling government managers to assign any given individual to his or her proper place in the social and economic hierarchy." That's what we have to have. Bring about the revolution, enabling government managers to decide what job you have. Once they got this dangan, what do you think is going to happen to the doctors and the nurses that aren't for active euthanasia, eugenics, the killing of the weak and the infirmed? What do you think is going to happen to the lawyers that stand up for religious liberty and freedom of speech? What do you think is going to happen to the school teacher that says, "I'm not going to teach that"? These managers, they'll be able to assign anyone to their given and proper place. They'll be able to analyze their worldview, as I discussed in my book in 95, and say, "I'm sorry, we can't have them become a doctor, a lawyer, a pastor, a talk show host, a newscaster, because they might infect other people with that world view." That's what I warned about in this book, which is why in this book I detail kids who are conservative, Christian, patriotic kids, straight A students, were relocated and told they should become waitresses or bartenders. It's in here. It's documented. I testified before the Senate in Kansas with one such mother. Aldous Huxley's told us in his book, Brave New World, to bring about the revolution we require, enabling government managers to assign any given individual to his or her proper place in the social and economic hierarchy. Round pegs in square holes tend to have dangerous thoughts about the social system and to infect others with their discontent, end quote. Do you think tonight I'm infecting people with the discontent of these worldviews? Warning you, digital ID is not going to allow you to get online to watch me. My digital ID will now allow us to log in to the internet to stream this out on multiple platforms. We will be shut down. Folks, I know it now. Our days of being able to sit here and broadcast with you and tell you the truth are numbered. Many people wonder, why does this guy work 7 days a week? He's on the air Monday through Friday, an awful lot of hours. Then he tells us he spends most of Saturday and Sunday spending hours studying so he can come back on Sunday night and teach a 1 hour plus verse by verse study through the book of Revelation. And he's been doing it like this for years. Why? You want to know why? There are a couple reasons. One is I'm trying to build my resume to get a really good assignment in the millennial kingdom. And if you think I'm joking, you don't understand the Bible or Bible prophecy. What we do here and now is going to greatly impact the job that we're assigned by the Lord himself in that 1,000-year millennial reign. And I want to serve the king at a high level of his government. When many people today are working in local, state, and federal government and think they have the best job, they have no clue the job that many of us are going to get for 1,000 years in the kingdom here on earth. I laid it out from the scriptures. I laid it out from the scriptures in my Sunday night study. Another reason I'm podcasting so many hours a week is because I really realize I'm broadcasting on borrowed time. The day is going to come when they put this system into place and we will have a hard time reaching anyone because they will have shut down free expression and broadcasting through this digital ID system. I could go on to share an awful lot with you. This has been underway since at least 1970. I can share articles with you from the Dallas Morning News. I could share articles with you from the Washington Star, 1970. I could share with you documentation that for a very long time, there has been the goal for computer systems to track America and Americans and school children and what they believe, and then to use it. But if you don't understand that this is global, this isn't just a UK thing. Here is the 16.9 of the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. Provide legal identity for all, including birth registration. They're going to get you registered, folks. And I do think it is the beginning of the mark of the beast system. It's not the beast system yet, but it's headed that direction. No doubt about it to me. And you've got many groups pushing this. Here's one from 2015. I showed you guys back then. And in 2020, UN agency selects Accenture. You guys know Accenture, right? For Refugee Biometrics Project. Yeah, that's what they say it's about. World Bank, Accenture call for universal ID. World Bank, you know who they are. That's the United Nations. Here's the Bank for International Settlements. They want a global payment system. And I've put all of this together in my series on brainwashing, and I talked about how one of the goals of brainwashing is to set up a system of rewards that honor, recognition, and advancement for those who embrace the worldview and values of the brainwashing program. Let me tell you something, folks. When they have a digital ID, they're going to be able to do it. They're going to be able to do it. This is an old document as well. This is the certificate of mastery for the state of Wisconsin. So many states did this. Here's a document from the Department of Education from Minnesota from 1996. It's been in my file since 1996. They call for cradle to career. Cradle to career. This is all about merging the Department of Education with the Department of Labor. That's, again, the 10th plank of the Communist Manifesto. That brings us to this. Inspired to serve. You guys know that in February of 2018, Captain Udell Myers and I began to warn about a committee being put together to study about drafting America's daughters. We know the young men have to sign up for selective service, but what about women, young ladies? So they put together a committee. You warned about it in February of 2018, tracked it, and then in March of 2020, they released their report, which included a transgender on here, by the way, this committee. And they did exactly what we expected they would do. They recommended to Congress that young ladies should also have to sign up for selective service. But they went on to do more than that. They actually recommended that all of America's kids would have to take a test called the NAEP, the National Assessment of Educational Progress. I've been warning about the called the NAEP, the National Assessment of Educational Progress. I've been warning about that for years. Here's one of my little newsletters my organization put together in November of 1996. 1996. The whole thing is about the National Assessment of Educational Progress, which asks a bunch of evasive questions and is a bunch of effective objectives, attitudes, values, feelings, beliefs. And this, the Congress recommends that becomes mandatory so they can harvest the attitudes and values and worldview of your children and grandchildren. You think that's going to go into their digital file? Yeah. So they not only recommended drafting America's daughters, they also recommended a national assessment test, the NAEP. And again, warned about it in 96. They also, in this document, call for so many hours of mandatory community service for junior high, high school kids to get out of school. And they said it's going to be for homeschoolers too. You think they're going to let you volunteer that time at the local pro-life organization, a Christian organization? No, they're going to send them to liberal social justice organizations to do their community service on the model of Barack and Michelle Obama. Barack Obama, Michelle Obama, I write about this in my book, Brave Influence. You don't need to buy it. It's in the vault under the free books. Her kids were doing community service at these liberal organizations that were brainwashing them into social justice. And I have quotes from some of the kids that went through the training. And the kids that say, no way, I'm not doing that. You think they're going to get a driver's license? You think they're going to be able to graduate? You think they're going to get into college? You think they're going to be able to get on the cell phone? Get online? No, everything will be tied to this digital ID to make you conform. But let me ask you this. What if we're headed for World War III? There's been a lot of talk about challenging Russia. NATO seems to be dying to go to war. And if we have some kind of big event in the country that I think is coming, big terrorist attack, and we go to World War III, maybe they won't need to do a draft. Maybe enough people will fall for the propaganda like they did after 9/11 and go join, only to see that we had a lot of people lose their life and limbs for what was the objective. I still don't know. In Afghanistan, Iraq. But those that go, at least that would be voluntary, even if it was done under a lack of discernment. But what if they have to do a draft? And what if you and your family say, there's no way my child's going to join this draft and go fight a war that we didn't want, we didn't pick, we didn't ask for. It doesn't involve hearth and home here. And you say they're not going. They get this digital ID system into place, they just turn your kid's digital ID off. No job for them, no life for them. That's what they're recommending, March 2020. Drafting America's daughters, setting up a national test that grabs the effective objectives of young people, their attitudes, their values, their feelings, their beliefs, and then mandates community service in woke, Marxist, cultural Marxist, social justice organizations. And you say, well, how are you going to get them to do it? We'll just refuse. Will you? Not with a digital ID, you won't. You see, folks, this is how you enslave people. And I have to tell you, I've grown tired of trying to warn people and protect people who simply want to mock those who are trying to warn. I know many in this audience appreciate it. You support us. You agree with us. So I know you can relate when I say I'm getting tired of trying to warn Americans about the dangers for them to say, I'm sorry, I don't have time to listen to this. I'm too busy watching football or baseball. Oh, there's a movie to go to. I'm sorry, I have to binge watch my latest show. There's a social event to go to. There's so much entertainment to be involved in, and this is so negative and doom and gloom. I don't have time for this. That's fine, don't. You think this is negative and doom and gloom? You wait until you are a slave and you can do nothing about it. You wait until your children and your grandchildren, I'm not necessarily talking to this audience if you're listening. I'm talking to the folks who aren't listening. Wait till their children and their grandchildren ask, how did we lose our liberties and freedoms? Mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, how? You think they're going to tell them the truth? Because we were stupid, we were apathetic, we were arrogant, we were passive, we were nihilistic, we were into hedonism, nothing but pleasure. That's how. You think they'll be smart enough to answer that way? Because that would be the truth for most of them. What are they going to say? I can tell you what most of them will say. Most of them will say, we didn't realize the system that was being built until it was too late. If we had only known, that's what many will say. If we had only known, we could have done something about it. Yeah. Well, you could have known, because we've been trying to tell you since 1995. And I'm not the only one. There's a small group of us. Some of them now have all passed away. But there's been a small group, and they could have known if they wanted to. Certainly their pastors could have warned them. Many of their pastors weren't that. They were hirelings. Many of their elected officials who claimed they were about serving the people could have warned them, but many of them were bought off by non-government organizations, or they too were too busy playing politics and thinking that those of us lifting up a shout in our communities were conspiracy theorists. They could have known, because the country, quite frankly, had people all across it, a lot of moms, a lot of dads, mostly moms, that were joining me and warning. Talk radio, other than G. Gordon Liddy, Ken Hamlin, the Black Avenger, Michael Reagan, Oliver North, Phyllis Schlafly was heavily involved, Bev LaHaye, D. James Kennedy. There were some talk show hosts trying, but they were the minority. Most conservative talk radio didn't want to talk about this. It was seen as too conspiracy related. It was also maybe just a little too complex. It was much, much easier to go to the Drudge Report and do a rip and read and do the right, left, dog and pony show versus have a guy come in and explain the history of what's happening. So they did the dog and pony show. They bought the whole right-left paradigm. And yet it's the right and the left that have been putting the whole thing together the whole time. You just saw how Betsy DeVos, with Trump's first term, helped put this whole thing together. Help push it down the road, I should say, at least. But that's what they're going to say. If we had only known. I think I'll conclude this segment tonight with the introduction of Keir Starmer admitting over there that in the UK, they're going to digital IDs and you will not get a job if you don't have one. And this is going to go global. It's going global. It'll be here before you know it. I've given you another warning. And this will be posted up online at worldviewtube.com tomorrow for you to share with family and friends that want to have the eyes to see and the ears to hear. It's all documented. I have no political agenda. I'm not a Republican. I'm an independent. I have no political allegiance to any party, only the truth. My agenda is only to remain free for my children, my grandchildren, because the alternative is that we will become slaves. Now you say, Brannon, you believe Bible prophecy. You know this is coming to pass. That's right. But I also know the Bible says that as Christians, we're to be salt and light. Salt, stop the rot. Be a preservative. Be an irritant. Stop the rot. Light, the gospel. This will stop the gospel in some ways, shutting down Christian radio, television, and so much. We have to fight to keep the airwaves open, the pulpits free, parental authority intact. We're called to occupy until the Lord returns. So even though I know these things are coming, my job as a believer, as a Christian, is to oppose evil. And as long as I'm here and as long as I'm alive, I am going to oppose evil. This is what happened in Germany. People stood up and they opposed evil. And you know, there was a guy, a scientist, Albert Einstein. He noticed what was going on. He noticed it was the Christians that were standing up and speaking out. He had very little use for the church, he said. But when he noticed there was no one else speaking up but a small group of committed Christians, he said, that group that I once despised, I now unreservedly praise. This is a great way to be a witness. But we owe it to our children, our grandchildren. But as Christians, as I said, we're called to not conform to this world. Perhaps the best way to close is this quote by Winston Churchill. We'll go to a break, come back with Anni Cyrus. Winston Churchill once said, if you will not fight for right when you can easily win without bloodshed, if you will not fight when your victory will be sure and not too costly, you may come to the moment when you will have to fight with all the odds against you and only a precarious chance of survival. There may be even a worse case. You may have to fight when there is no hope of victory, because it's better to perish than to live as slaves. The digital ID system will be a global slavery system. And it will empower the ruling elite to punish dissent, free speech, freedom of thought, freedom of conscience, parental authority, like nothing this world has ever seen. They won't need concentration camps next time around. That's too visible. That's too dirty, I think. It's too messy. Too expensive. I think next time around, you're just going to see people have their digits turned off, and they will either fade away or they will conform to have their digit turned back on. This is going to separate the men from the boys, the true believers from the fakers. But it is a slavery system. If you appreciate what we're doing here, folks, we're one of the few networks that will take the time to do this. Do you think you're going to see this on most any of these other talk radio, talk TV networks? You're not. The host doesn't have the history, the knowledge to understand it from years and years of hard work and study, number one. Number two, do you think they would let them teach it? No. So if you appreciate what we're doing and that we're going to put this up tomorrow at worldviewtube.com for you to share far and wide, then I need your support. Worldviewfoundation.com is one way you can do it. Worldviewfoundation.com. Another way is to go to worldviewtube.com/sponsors. See if there's some great products there for you that you can use like I do, whether it's Bella Grace, Numi, Gatatana, Worldview Talk, our Gold Company. See if there's some service there, a product there that you can benefit from because they support us with each and every purchase. It's either worldviewfoundation.com, worldviewtube.com/sponsors, or go to worldviewtube.com/vault. Join our vault. Have access to all my books, including my book from 95 and all my other books detailing how we got where we are today. Because if you'll keep supporting us, as many of you are, we'll keep pushing out the truth as long as we can until they shut us down, which we pray will be a long time from now if we have awakened enough voices. There's very little we can't do when we come together because, after all, we are Americans. And at our very base is a love of freedom. So, spread this knowledge, this truth, so that people can have wisdom and respond correctly before this system is installed as it's now been unveiled in the UK. We've been warned. Time is running out to awaken the American people before we see a broadcast from our leaders saying, by the end of this year, by the end of next year, if you don't have this, you won't have a job. You won't have a life. Because if that day comes, I'm going to be very sad to think that Americans had the opportunity, had the information, but didn't respond. They won't be able to say if we had only known, because they can know, and we can tell them. We'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Brannon Howse. I want to thank you for all your support at wvwfoundation.com that helps make possible pushing out 24/7 content for free. Without your support, we'd have to put it all behind a paywall. But thanks to you and your support through our foundation, we're able to push it out for free as a broadcast service and broadcast ministry of WVW Foundation. Please consider going there and setting up an automatic monthly contribution, or go there and make an occasional contribution. If you prefer to support us through the mail, you'll find our mailing address there at wvwfoundation.com. You can also call and make your contribution over the phone by calling 901-825-0652. That's 901-825-0652. Again, all these details are available at wvwfoundation.com. Thank you for your support as we try to help people around the world understand the times through the lens of a Christian worldview.
President Trump hosted the president of Turkey yesterday, Erdogan, and is apparently lifting the ban on F-35 sales. President Trump also says that he will not allow Israel to annex the West Bank. That's the derogatory term for Judea and Samaria. I want to get Anni's take on this and more about the Middle East and what's happening and the speech by Benjamin Netanyahu at the United Nations today. Anni, welcome back to the broadcast. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Brannon.
Okay, let's start with Erdogan, president of Turkey, in the Oval Office yesterday, lifting the ban of the F-35s. Wait a minute. Why are we going to help Turkey when they want to recreate the Ottoman Empire and really take over Israel? Why are we doing this? Can you help me here?
Well, my personal opinion is that I said this a few months ago on your show, on my show too. It's that President Trump has truly believed that he can make all the deals with all the Islamic leaders and somewhat make history for himself. And I don't think he's thinking beyond that. He doesn't care. He doesn't tend to care that it's not just Israel. On my Substack, I pointed out, if anybody is okay with this, when you hear on the news that Erdogan used American weapons against civilians, Christians, Kurds, or Israel, you can't take your endorsement back then, because Erdogan has a long resume of killing people. He has shown that he doesn't hesitate.
You're talking about the president of Turkey. He doesn't hesitate to kill people.
Yes, he doesn't. He has a long resume, and I mean really long resume, from killing his own people in Turkey. He has, under his command, there were 3 operations outside of Turkey border inside Syria that specifically targeted Kurds of Syria and Christians of Syria. That was under his command. It wasn't he funded some terrorist group to go do it. No, he actually, under his command, those attacks took place. He has also has a long track of, first of all, let's focus on one sentence that he has said that a lot of people have forgotten. And what he said was, it is offensive when the West says radical Islam. There is just one Islam. This is the man who walked around the White House yesterday and sat down with President Trump. The man who doesn't even believe what Trump believes, moderate versus radical. He believes there's just one Islam. And he's also the man who has called Israel's actions in 2014, not right now, not when it's fashion. In 2014, he called Israel's action more barbaric than the Nazi Hitler. So he has made his feelings very clear. He has killed people. He has funded ISIS. He has gave safe passage to ISIS members through Turkey. And none of that seemed to matter to President Trump, though. He just wants to prove that he can make a deal with anyone.
And of course, I wonder what Benjamin Netanyahu thought about this, right? Lifting this F-35 ban on Turkey.
Well, I believe they're having their meeting Monday, being President Trump and Bibi on Monday, supposedly specifically about Iran. But I would like to know if that's going to be discussed as well or not. He did not, Netanyahu didn't address that meeting or the possibility of lifting the ban on F-35s, but on his address this morning at UN. But I am curious. He was pretty firm, though.
Well, I was going to say, what did you think of his speech today?
His speech. I think it was by far one of the most unfiltered and direct speeches Bibi has given at UN or anywhere else. I actually took the time to listen to the whole thing. As always, he showed up with receipt. He didn't just wave his hands and yell and scream. I'm glad he called out the juvenile act by what 2/3 of the room basically left when he started his speech, which should give a great heads up to Americans. This is where the world is now, because 2/3 of that room are not Islamic nations. It isn't. Maybe 1/4 of that room were Islamic nations. So the rest of the countries that walked out are those who have already bowed to the Islamization of their nations. But I'm glad he called it out. And in general, I really think what he said is what he's going to do. I don't think he cares anymore for who's his ally or not. He sounded very convinced that he's on his own.
What do you make of President Trump? And we dealt with this yesterday, but I think we have to come back to it. Trump says, this is military.com, will not allow Israel to annex the West Bank. You know, I said on radio today, for all these anti-Semites that say that Donald Trump is the puppet of Netanyahu, are they not watching the news? Because every time we turn around, Donald Trump's telling Israel what they can and cannot do, that he's angry with Benjamin Netanyahu, he's upset with Benjamin Netanyahu. Disappointed. So if Trump is the puppet of Benjamin Netanyahu, this is a weird act. Of course, it proves it's not the case. But why on earth is President Trump involving himself in this? And why is he calling it the West Bank, or not correcting him and saying that's a derogatory term? It's actually Judea and Samaria. And
wait, I'm sorry, Brian. Wait, do you actually think President Trump knows that? You are expecting way too much of President Trump.
Well, that's very interesting you said that. So I want to drill down on that. So you're saying that if you were to ask President Trump, what is the West Bank, he wouldn't know that's Judea and Samaria?
No, he would not have a clue.
Wow. Well, that's interesting, because on radio today, I said in my opening monologue, we have a lot of world leaders who don't know very much at all. They know what they know, but that's it. I mean, that's true with all of us. We all know what we know, but they lack so much knowledge You and I have both worked with people. You and I have worked with some of the same people who are very successful, have been very successful in their areas, very successful financially in other ways. But they come out of the business world in other places, and when you talk to them, they don't know much of anything other than how to cut deals, how to market, how to promote, how to get attention. They don't know so much about history, the worldviews, communism, Marxism, postmodernism, the other worldviews of the world. One guy, very successful guy, called me up one day. He said, "Who's this Hezbollah guy?" I said, "It's not a guy, it's a terrorist organization," right? I guarantee you, if I were to say, "Mr. Trump," privately, "Mr. Trump, can you tell me the Labor Party? You know the Labor Party, Great Britain." "Yep, Brandon, I know the Labor Party." "Can you tell me who birthed the Labor Party? Who started it?" "It's the Fabian Socialist." "Can you tell me, Mr. Trump, about the Fabian Socialist? What can you tell me about them? What are their goals? What are their objectives? Can you tell me about some of the leading Fabians in the books they wrote? Can you tell me about the Fabian window?" I don't think he could answer any of these questions. And yet he seems to be now going to lean on a Fabian, a Labor Party Fabian by the name of Tony Blair, who actually unveiled the Fabian window after it was stolen and then showed back up again, and said that he hopes the Labor Party is fulfilling the goals of the Fabian Socialist Society. And I want to show everybody, just to remind them, what the Fabian window looks like, because it sure looks like what's happening to the world again today. We have shown this so many times over the years. This was created by George Bernard Shaw. George Bernard Shaw created the Fabian window, I think back in 1910. And it's been in so many of my books, documentaries, TV shows, radio shows. Here it is. The world's on fire. A man in a red coat, a man in a green coat, banging on the world. It's hot. The man in the green coat is having to hold it with a pair of tongs on an anvil, and they're banging on it. And at the top, it says, "Mold it near to the heart's desire." Remold what? The world. How do you remold the world? You set it on fire. You manufacture a crisis, and you offer up the solution. Then behind the man in the red coat, you'll see the fire. And you'll see the man in the purple coat with a bellow blowing the fire. He's blowing wind, oxygen, fuel, if you will, onto the fire. And they put the world into this manufactured chaos. And then they pull it out and they remold it to get man to go where he otherwise would never go. Notice at the top of the Fabian window, or above the world that's on fire, what do you have, folks? That is a wolf in sheep's clothing. You use religion as well. And Tony
I was just
Blair
about to say, and I'm sure the red and the green is just coincidence.
Just coincidental, the red, the Marxist, the green, the Islamist, right?
and the fact that they match each other's color on the shoe part is absolutely just artistic.
Yeah, the red. Now the guy in the green's wearing the red shoes, and the guy in the red is wearing, and the green's wearing the red, and the guy in the red's wearing the green. Very good analysis there. And the other guy's wearing his red shoes. And of course, we know that experts and Fabians have even admitted there's very little difference between the Fabians and the Marxists. That they work together, use each other. The Fabians, their whole thing is evolution, revolution by evolution, a revolution, but they want it by evolution, slowly over time. And I wake up today to find out President Trump's now going to lean on Tony Blair, who we've been talking about the fact that he's been working behind the scenes for some time to negotiate some kind of peace in the Middle East. Tony Blair, the Fabian. Now, if President Trump throws in with Tony Blair, that to me shows that President Trump is either knowingly, and I would suggest unknowingly throwing in with the New World Order globalist. And of course, the quest here for them is a Eurocentric world government. Go read their own writings. Read Carol Quigley. Read the Fabians, the globalists. They're telling you they want a Eurocentric world government. We all know about the Rhodes Scholarship, Cecil Rhodes, Bill Clinton, George Stephanopoulos, all these Cecil Rhodes guys and more we could name. Cecil Rhodes openly said, I want a world government out of Europe. And that's what the Labour Party wants. That's what the Fabians want. And if President Trump throws in with the likes of Tony Blair, a Labour Party Fabian socialist, then you know that President Trump has been co-opted by the Fabians and that New World Order crowd that wants a European-dominated world government. Your thoughts, Annie?
100% agreed. And it gets a little worse with Blair, Tony Blair, as the fact that with White House backing, he's not just going to help create some sort of ceasefire or peace deal. He's going to also put together a temporary or transitional government for quote-unquote Palestine. He's going to lead that government until Palestinian people...
And I'm sorry. Yep, keep going.
That's right. Until the Palestinian people can pick their own government. So I remember on Monday when I released my Substack on Britain crowning Palestine, I specifically mentioned, and I was on your show that day, we talked about it as well, and I specifically said this move was not just about UK bowing and being infiltrated inside its government. It's also about power. England has lost power when it comes to the 1917 plan or fire they started, so they need to regain power. And look, they are going, if this goes forward, I really hope Netanyahu does not get involved with this new charade. But if this goes forward, Tony Blair is going to be basically the head of government in Palestine until the new permanent government is placed. If that's not power, what is? And for President Trump to be part of that, again, it goes back to from day one of his second term, I just said, my biggest concern is his only priority is to making every possible history when it comes to making deal, because he cares about that title of master of all deals or whatever they call him. And every person who's defending every single move of Trump, pretending like this is a 3D chess and this is a deal you just waited out, is enabling that very fire that you showed on that picture. It's getting absolutely out of control, Brannon.
Yep.
And by the way, going back to something a little earlier, I want to know who exactly gave President Trump the power and authority to allow or not allow Israel to do whatever they do. Seriously, where is this document? I like to read. Where does it say President of the United States of America, just like the promise he made to Qatar? Who gave the President of the United States all of this power? President of the United States is in charge of United States of America, not Gaza, not quote-unquote Palestine, not Israel, not Iran, and nowhere else. If this was Biden, everybody out there, every talking head on alternative media would be screaming, abuse of power, it's our tax dollar going into all of that. Where are they? Why is nobody bothered by the tax dollars going into something that we shouldn't be involved with?
Yep.
And then the fact that he's playing both sides. On the same sentence, he also says Palestine, we will not recognize Palestine as a state. You cannot have it both ways, Mr. President.
Nope, you sure can't. Let me show you the picture real quick of Tony Blair in 2006. There he is, unveiling the Fabian window. It was stolen and then was recaptured. There he is, unveiling the Fabian window. Tony Blair, by the way, also wants to bring in hate crime laws for those who deny the Holocaust. Talk about it in my book, The Coming Religious Reich in 2016. And the rabbis over in Europe said, we don't want hate crime laws that criminalize people that deny the Holocaust as much as we hate Holocaust deniers, because that will be used to deny us our freedom of speech. By the way, just FYI, if you go to YouTube, here I am speaking in 2000. This was 13 years ago. The Fabian window and Tony Blair reveal the role religion will play in global governance. That was 13 years ago, says YouTube. So we've been hammering this longer than 13 years. But again, I hate to say it, President Trump doesn't understand the Middle East, Bible prophecy, Islam, Fabian socialism, the globalist. And what I said on radio today is very what popped in my mind was very interesting. I said, a lot of these politicians are chasing their tails and flip-flopping. And Dr. Rob Lindstedt said today to me, I can't keep up. President Trump's making me dizzy. He crosses the street back and forth so many times. I can't keep up what lane he's in. And I said on radio and TV that this chasing of the tail by all these world leaders is going to happen, and all of the chaos, all the confusion, that's what's going to drive the world, I think, to accept the Antichrist. Finally, a guy's going to show up. And as I said on radio and TV today, he actually, unlike many of the world leaders today, he actually will understand the Bible. The Antichrist will understand the Bible. He will understand Bible prophecy. He'll be totally opposed to it, but he'll know it because he's demon-possessed. And then eventually, I think, after he has received a mortal head wound about halfway through the 7-year tribulation, the Bible says he is called back up out of the abyss. And I believe at that point, you have a so-called resurrection. Satan can't create life, but God apparently gives Satan the permission to bring the soul or the spirit of the Antichrist back up out of the abyss, the text says in Revelation. And at that point, he overtakes the 2 witnesses and kills them, and their bodies lie in the street for 3.5 days before God calls them up into the heavens. And the whole world sees it, the text says. And the world says, wow, who can overcome the beast? At first it was, who could overcome the 2 witnesses? Well, he did. Now he's had a resurrection, if you will. I think at that point he is Satan-possessed. And the demons and Satan know the Bible and they know Bible prophecy, but they're opposed to it. They hate it. But they're going to do everything they can to stop the things in the Bible from being fulfilled with the Jewish people, with those Gentiles, with those tribulation saints. And they're going to wage war against the Jews to kill every last one on the planet. So the Bible cannot be fulfilled as we see in the scriptures. And yet today we don't have anyone that knows really in power around the world that knows the Bible, Bible prophecy, a biblical worldview. So they chase their tails. And I think that's going to allow for the Antichrist to come to power because he actually will know what's going on. He'll get it. And then he's going to rip 3 countries out by the root, says Daniel, I think chapter 9. He rips them out by the root because he can't even get his New World Order without getting rid of 3 of these world leaders. So isn't it interesting? All of this chaos and flip-flopping back and forth, that's all setting the stage for the people to say, we're done with these politicians. They don't have a clue what they're doing. When this man, the son of perdition, shows up, performing counterfeit miracles, signs, and wonders, and he actually knows what to do because he actually knows the Bible, what God's plan is, and starts to become the antithesis, the anti-Christ. What do you make of that, Annie?
I 100%. I mean, 5 years ago, I would be completely clueless when you were talking, but thanks to your Sunday program, I completely follow you where you're going with this, and I agree. However, let me add something because for last 4 days on my Substack, every day, people are getting a recap of the day of UN General Assembly, day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, and on and on. And in order to do that, what I have to do is sit here and listen to every speech, grab the highlights, and conclude for people of what the narrative of each speech was. And I want to say, except a handful of world leaders, on top of that handful, I want to emphasize Argentina. Other than that handful of world leaders, the rest of the narrative is so perfectly placed, Brannon. And that was the reason I did this year, where I'm giving recap for people to realize this is a narrative that is being fed to us. And when we ignore it, when we don't listen to it, that's when we are left behind in understanding that Trump or not, majority of world leaders are being fed lies. And because of their lack of understanding of history, topics, there were topics I had to search and learn about because I had no idea what they're talking about. But I think I did more research on these topics than any of the world leaders, excluding the handful of them, including Trump. They don't understand they're being fed lies. So yes, it's going to get to where people will be fed up with these uneducated, I don't mean PhD holders, uneducated on the relevant topics of their duties. You cannot stand at any podium, be a leader of any nation when you have no clue as to where history stands. When you claim things that don't exist, or as a leader of a Christian nations, including America, you cannot stand there, refer to words that are not correct, or show so much boasting of your power that your Christian voters will come to realize that you are not a follower of Christ. This is all about your ego.
Can't argue with that. Let me go to my book, Religious Trojan Horse. Religious Trojan Horse came out in 2011. Look at this, 2011. Here's what I write. In a twist of irony, or perhaps in a plan well laid and patiently implemented since 1883, the British Fabian socialists are going to dominate America's financial system. Dick Morris's April 7th, 2009 article, it was entitled, European Socialism to Run Our Financial System. It explains, quote, on April 2nd, 2009, the work of July 4th, 1776 was nullified at the meeting of the G20 in London. The joint communique essentially announces a global economic union with uniform regulations and bylaws for all nations, including the United States. Henceforth, our SEC, Security Exchange Commission, Commodity Futures Trading Commission, Federal Reserve Board, and other regulatories will have to march to the beat of drums pounded by the Financial Stability Board, a body of central bankers from each of the G20 states and the European Union. The mandate conferred on the Financial Stability Board is remarkable for its scope and open-endedness. It is to set a framework of internationally agreed high standards that a global financial system requires. Now we no longer look to presidential appointees confirmed by the Senate to make policy for our economy. These decisions will be made internationally, and Europe will dominate them. The Financial Stability Forum, precursor to the Financial Stability Board, and presumably now the FSB, is composed of the central bankers of Australia, Canada, France, Germany, Hong Kong, Italy, Japan, Netherlands, Singapore, Switzerland, the United Kingdom, and the United States, plus representatives of the World Bank, the European Union, the IMF, and the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. The Europeans have been trying to get their hands on our financial system for decades. It's essential to them that they rein in American free enterprise so that their socialist heaven will not be polluted by vices such as the profit motive, end quote. I write, the developments in Europe represent what I believe is the revived Roman Empire predicted in Daniel chapter 2, verses 41 to 43. This sort of prophecy reveals the remarkable supernatural nature of God's word. And I go on from there, including a 2008 article in the Financial Times by Gideon Rachman. He said, quote, I've never believed that there is a secret United Nations plot to take over the U.S. I've never seen black helicopters hovering in the sky above Montana, but for the first time in my life, I think the formation of some form of world government is plausible. A world government would involve much more than cooperation between nations. It would be an entity with state-like characteristics backed by a body of laws. The European Union already has a set up and continental government for 27 countries, which could be a model. The EU has a Supreme Court, a currency, thousands of pages of law, a large civil service, and the ability to deploy military force. So could the model go global? He goes on to say and talk about this further. But isn't this interesting, folks? That's from my 2011 book. Dick Morris saying George W. Bush, under the last financial crisis, shoved us up underneath a European model. Is this one reason why, after President Trump went to Europe and met with King Charles, that he comes back with a little bit different tune and then puts on Truth Social about going to war basically with Russia? We're going to give the weapons, America, to NATO. NATO can do what they want with them. With Ukraine, hey, you might want to consider getting all your land back and maybe taking some of Putin's. Something's changed. I think he gets his marching orders from the European globalist. And I think that's why you got Tony Blair involved. What do you make of what I'm putting here? That George W. Bush already shoved us up under Europe. Europe is already controlling us, as Dick Morris laid out back in 2008. President Trump, despite what he thinks, isn't really in control. And I think he's marching to the drum of the European globalists that are telling him what to do as we head toward the fulfillment of a Eurocentric world government. And now you have the UK's Stormer coming out telling everybody, if you want a job, if you want to keep your job, you're going to have digital ID. I mean, it's lining up. President Trump is not in charge. I don't know if he realizes that, but I'm telling you, he's not. He's very in charge on a global scale, very, very small amount. Annie?
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense for a lot of Americans keep asking, why is it that what happens in Europe ends up happening in America too? Because that's who's leading the policies and the movements and, as you said, financial system of U.S. Again, that's why I keep saying it doesn't matter who's in the White House. If it's a Democrat, we know who they take their marching orders from. And if it's a Republican, it has been a long time. I think it might even be before George Bush, unless you're referring to the father, not the son, that, Europe started having their hands in our business and giving marching orders to Republicans. And since you talk about, Trump coming out saying, let's go to war with Russia, of course, the same drum they're beating for Iran, which is another chasing your own tail situation. The Supreme Leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran came out 2 days ago and said, we're done. No more negotiation, resume enrichment. The head of the state just made the order, but we're still trying to do negotiations. But this morning also, Iran and Russia signed a $25 billion deal for a new nuclear power plants. Well, for 4 new nuclear power plants. So that's right there of, the more Trump thinks he can go up against Russia, Russia also got their axis with Iran. And funny enough, this morning, after 2.5 months, we reported on your show and myself, it's like on June 26th of this year, we reported that there's a mountain, Kolang Mountain in Iran, that was and is the main nuclear facility. And of course, everybody denied it. But guess what was released on Washington Post this morning? Kolang Mountain in Iran is seeing activities, and they're guessing now that is where all the missing enriched uranium were.
Mm-hmm.
We reported on June 26th. Today, United States of America is talking about it. For how long they were sitting in this information? Long enough for Trump to figure out what is his next step or what is his next order when it comes to Middle East. So bottom line is, yes, I have agreed with your statement for a while now that Trump is not in charge. Nobody in his administration is in charge. But how do we get Americans to come to accept that? That's the $1 million question.
What do you make of this statement? I don't know why Charlie Kirk was killed beyond what the media tells us with this shooter, which I still don't understand how he practiced. Where did he practice? Where's the video of him going to a range practicing? Who was communicating with him? Who was doing surveillance? Who was picking the site? All of this. Colonel Rob Maness was saying this guy had to have a whole team helping him, actually, and they were likely, terrorist, insurrectionist, enemies, foreign and domestic. Hadiyah thinks that they are Islamist, ISIS, one step ahead of us, recruiting LGBTQ. They could care less if they convert. But here's what I would ask, and I think our government was involved at some level. That's just my gut feeling. Can't prove it. I'm not saying the Trump and Trump administration. I'm talking about the shadow government. But if we're headed toward war, Annie, and we have been doing all kinds of reports since 2018 on the idea of even drafting America's daughters, and here's that document I've talked about and warned about starting 2018. February 2018, Captain Udell Myers and I started warning about this committee that was going to put together a report, and it came out in March of 2020, and they said exactly what we expected. Oh yeah, we should draft America's daughters too. If the neocons and the globalists want to take us to war, and war seems to check all the boxes, obviously I'm going to stand up and have been saying, my kid's not going. Sorry, my kids aren't going. But Charlie Kirk, he seems to be a guy that was starting to figure out these neocons, these wars, these foreign wars. Can you imagine if the plan down the road is to go to war and either to have a major terrorist attacks in the country, which many people think is coming, major terrorist attacks coming. If the plan is to use those terrorist attacks to get people to join the military like they did after 9/11, or to go toward a draft, don't you think someone like Charlie Kirk would have been a real thorn in their side? Because I kind of think, in my opinion, he would have said to young people, no. You don't want to go get involved in these wars, lose your life and your limbs blown off for these neocons and their global wars. And I don't care if they do a draft. I'm going to start using my rallies on college campuses to oppose a mandatory draft. Now, I don't know if that's what he would have done, but that's the trajectory I saw him going. Is that one of the reasons why, if the deep state was involved in taking him out, that might be why? They know what they're going to be doing down line, and they don't need a Charlie Kirk motivating the young people of America not to go along. What do you think of that theory? And it is a theory. What do you think of that, Annie?
Well, it's a reasonable theory because, yes, when I actually wrote a counterpiece to Charlie Kirk, was his whole argument was we need to stay away from all these wars. So, yes, he was the guy who was against unnecessary wars. He was not against war. He was very clear that if we're ever attacked, of course, we fight back, but we don't need to fight other countries' war, which is exactly what you're referring to. And yes, I can see him being an influence and push back against draft and a lot of younger people listening to him. And yes, that could be part of it. In general, I have come to accept for myself that Charlie Kirk was not assassinated based on his anti-trans narrative. No, I refuse to believe that for the rest of my life unless somebody really showed me proof for it. I do believe he was taken out, as you said, by shadow government, if you want to call it, because he was in about 5 to 10 years, Charlie Kirk would have become a Lincoln for this country. And that they can't have that. Because, again, I didn't disagree with Charlie. I corrected him on certain historical mistakes he made on his show about Iran and Israel war. But other than that, he had a path that was based on biblical values, which is rare. You know, we don't have that young generation who would start, a platform and still stay within the Bible, no matter if it would add to their popularity or not. So, yes. What you're saying is part of it, but I think in general, he had to be taken out because in 5 to 10 years, he would have become a huge threat to both parties by training and educating the next generation, basically getting the next generation to stand up and say, no more corruption. We're not going to settle and pick between two of, the lesser evil of two. And that's why he had to be taken out.
And what if he would have been a problem in 2026, 2027, 2028, should we have a massive terrorist attack like we think is coming, like an October 7th style, that I think the government will likely let happen. And all these kids have a patriotic fervor whipped up, quote, patriotic fervor, to be used to get them to enlist and go fight. Mm-hmm. Or a draft. Don't you think even less than 10 years and next year, the year after that, whenever this happens, and that happened, don't you think a Charlie Kirk-like figure will be standing up saying to young people, think clearly.
Absolutely.
Think clearly here. Do you really want to go have your limbs blown off for more global wars fought for corporations? Because in the end, isn't it what it always is about? Regime change for the New World Order, corporations and lithium and minerals. Isn't that what the multi-star general Smedley Butler said in his book, War is a Racket? It's always fought for corporations. Think twice, young people. You could have a real problem getting these young people to go along with war if you have someone like him who's got credibility with them, calling bluff, calling lies.
Yes, absolutely. And let's not forget, yes, this is the globalism playbook, but I'm going to turn around and take it back to President Trump. What is he doing, Brannon? All the handshakes he's making. And I have felt the frustration for myself when I see the comments on my reports of, oh, if he's doing it, there has to be a reason. Just wait it out. Or, the old saying of keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer, about al-Shara, about Erdogan coming to the White House. These are the response I'm getting. But when you look at it, for example, today, the Prime Minister of Pakistan stands on the stage of UN and says, what? President Trump deserves to win the Nobel Prize. Why? Because he has stopped the possible war between Pakistan and India. That's not why you're nominating him. Those of us who reported very deep digging into your new agreement and deal with the White House of President Trump, we know you're nominating him because he just gave you a deal for your oil and minerals. And we're doing the same thing with Syria. So, yes, it is the globalist playbook, but President Trump is reading right off of the same playbook. I'm sorry, but that is what he's doing. He's making all these deals, making deals with the devil. And I'm going to take it quickly back to me and you and your audience. As Christians, we have a duty. When you cover up one sin, cherry pick the other one, and step on your biblical values and say, keep your friends closer, your enemies, close your enemies closer, you literally just separated your path from Christ. To defend Trump for allowing these murderer people, these aren't just some talking heads. Al-Shara has Christian blood on his hands.
You're talking about the current president of Syria who has
yes.
slaughtered and butchered Christians in the Middle East.
Exactly. He came... Well, President Trump shook his hand and called him a good-looking guy, all of that in Middle East, but then he also came to U.S. He was in New York. He gave a speech at UN. And now there are talks that I don't even know where to go with that one, but Israel has confirmed that they are negotiating with Syria. We covered that on your show too. And then you have Erdogan, who again, the president of Turkey has killed a specifically group, targeted Christians in Syria for the fact that they were Christians. As Christians, we cannot side with President Trump's actions saying this is diplomacy. He is making deals. He's allowing the enemy into the White House. Brannon, can you imagine for how long the capital of Turkey is going to plaster these photo op and handshakes and the smiles and the phrase by President Trump calling Erdogan an old and always a good friend of America? Can you imagine the PR campaign they're going to have starting tomorrow for months and years that they have American president's approval?
And isn't this the Erdogan that talked about how we better shape up or people are going to be scared to walk down the street in America?
Well, he said that about Europe.
That was Europe. Okay.
Yes, he said, I'm going to flood your countries with my soldiers, jihadists. But he's the same guy who, in 2019, when President Trump made a little bit of, flexing muscle, saying we might put sanctions on Turkey, he came out and said, I'm going to shut down both your bases. One of them hosting almost 50 or 50 plus of our atomic weapons. He made threats toward our bases. And now we sit there and listen to President Trump having a talk with Erdogan, with the press in front of him saying, if anybody knows of manipulated elections, is this good friend of mine. He just endorsed the fake coup of Erdogan that ended up with almost 50,000 Turk citizens in prisons. He endorsed that fake coup, saying it was a fraud in their election. There was no fraud in that election. Erdogan just couldn't handle the lose. So he created it as election fraud and then unleashed his military on the streets on Turkish people. But President Trump, in order to relay the 2020 message, he just endorsed that barbaric act where innocent Turk men and women were killed, imprisoned, tortured, and some are still serving prison time in Turkey. We need to stop defending these actions.
I know this might upset some of the audience, but I'm not here to win popularity contest. I'm here to present the truth and ask questions. The more I watch what's happening, the more I have to ask, is God judging America?
Absolutely.
Is God judging America? And he's using the Trump administration even to set up and judge the country. And many people are denying the facts because they want safety, they want security, they want financial. Well, and I understand that. We all have families. We want to put food on the table and pay our bills. We want our children and grandchildren and wives to walk down the street safe, right? So there's nothing wrong with any of those things. But I have to wonder if God isn't judging the country because we are so busy concentrating on material things instead of looking at these issues through a spiritual lens. In other words, we're compromising even Christian values, not to mention American values, but ultimately Christian values because the end justifies the means. We want a better economy. We want a safer country. We want these things. And there's nothing wrong with those things in and of themselves. But what I'm saying is we cannot make deals with those who slaughter Christians. We cannot make deals with those who have openly stated they want to eliminate Israel from the river to the sea. We cannot make deals with people that are aligned against the Bible, against God himself, and blaspheme him and think that somehow God's going to bless our country. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And if you don't mind me getting a little personal for a minute, you know me, Brannon, I'm a sinner, probably worse than most Christians. I don't claim to be perfect. But a long time ago, before I was even saved, I came to realize that God provides. There's a story that close friends know that I avoid potatoes unless I absolutely have to eat them. I don't eat them. Reason for that is when I was a refugee, there was a time where all I had money for was to buy one bag of potatoes, just one bag. I don't know, 7, 8 potatoes will be in a bag. And I ate one potato every day. And that bag lasted. It just kept lasting. It's like for every potato I took off, somebody put another one in there. And the potato was in my room, so it wasn't really somebody putting potatoes in there. It lasted me 31 days until the next time I had money to buy egg and bread. I wasn't saved back then. I was an ex-Muslim, not knowing what I'm doing with my life. Fast forward, as you know, and your audience knows, because I've told my audience on Word YouTube, I am officially unemployed. What I am doing is working on the book and writing and reporting, doing my show every day, just through my Substack and art studio and few projects here and there, try to pay the bills. 3 days ago, I contacted a friend to say, hey, I might be a little short for my October bills. I might need your help. It was like, sure, let me know if you do. I hung up that afternoon, checked my mailbox, and there was a check in my mailbox for about $4,000 from a federal government investigation into some company that I was a client of that was apparently doing wrong. And they sent me a $4,000, close to $4,000 after 7 years of me not even being client of that company.
Wow.
My point, I am a sinner. I am nowhere near perfect, but I believe God provides. And on that faith, I have dropped every project offered to me to sit here, report on the truth, expose the dangers of Islam and the red-green axis, try to get the book out, all of that. And on last minute, he just drops a check in my mailbox. When you don't compromise your values, he'll give you a better economy. He'll give you a better leadership. He'll give you a better life. He'll give you a happier family. The problem is we have forgotten that. We have forgotten that he provides it all, from health to happiness to success, to money, all of it comes from him. When half of this country decided to call Trump their savior, of course he's going to judge us. He's going to say, oh, you think he is your savior? Here you have him. Let's see how much he's going to save you.
Wow. Well said. Anni Cyrus, liveuptofreedom.com. Liveuptofreedom.com. Great way to close. She also has her art studio, lutfstudio.com, lutfstudio.com. Great way to close. Thank you, Anni.
Absolutely. Thank you, Brannon. Stay safe.
You too, my friend. We'll be right back after this break. We have a big announcement, folks, something we've been waiting on for several months, and it's now here. It's called Bella Melt. You were on it for just 1 week when you lost 3 pounds. So in the first week, you lost 3 pounds on this, right?
That is correct.
Your GLP-1 is a natural hormone that's in every single one of our bodies. And your GLP-1 lets you know if you're full. It's a satiety hormone. So when your GLP is working properly, it does help suppress your appetite as well as reduce those cravings. It's a sugar-free, fast melt caramel. So what it's going to do best is it's going to reduce your sugar cravings or any other cravings you have in your body. It's going to suppress that appetite. But where Melissa got the most benefit, I think, over the last week was the L-carnitine. The L-carnitine tells your mitochondria, this is where you make, we've talked about it before, this is where you produce energy in your cells. It actually tells those mitochondria to burn fat for fuel. We're noticing other people losing up to 7 pounds in the first week. 4 pounds has been about the average. As you lose weight and as you take these Bella Melts, it's going to help lower that blood sugar in your body as well.
All the information is there. MelissaHouseBG.com, MelissaHouseBG.com. Just now introducing for the first time Bella Melt with GLP-1 fast action. Joining me now is Dr. Schreiner and Dr. Moon. One is a pediatrician. I think the other one is also a pediatrician. I think they're both pediatricians, if I remember correctly. Hey, guys, welcome back. Thank you for coming in to give us an update. Am I correct? You're both pediatricians, aren't you?
Yeah, 2 pediatricians.
Correct.
Yep.
All right, excellent.
Yep.
All right, there's a lot on the table tonight. You guys text me saying that you had a lot to discuss. You want to warn our audience about. Who wants to go first?
Either one of us can start.
Go ahead, Dr. Moon.
We've had a lot of announcements this last week, and really the top one, I think, was in the medical front was HHS Secretary RFK Jr. and President Trump announcing, at their press conference, their recommendations that are coming out about Tylenol use in pregnant women and young children, and also, some recommendations about the vaccine schedule. But I think the most important part of that press conference to highlight is the fact that they are openly advocating for free speech, open discussion, dialogue, and debate again in the medical world, which is huge. We've been completely locked down in the medical world, and in many ways we still are, but at least they're chipping away at this and starting to say, no, we're going to look at this. So a lot of hope for the families of children affected with autism as we begin to explore what the different causes might be.
That is good news. And of course, it looks like some of the platforms are going to try to start lifting some of their bans or sanctions and whatnot. So that's good too. So more people can speak truth. Dr. Schreiner, what did you make of this week's press conference with President Trump and RFK Jr.?
I was happy to see that Secretary Kennedy is going to push for the studies that, as he said, should have been done decades ago, looking at vaccines and the fact that they need to prove that they're safe and not assume that they're safe and then give them and then see what data comes, which then they go and hide anyways. Mm-hmm. So I'm excited that they're going to do the studies that need to be done.
Good. What are your guys' thoughts on Tylenol? Let me start with you, Dr. Moon. What are your thoughts on women taking Tylenol? I mean, I think it's the vaccines and the Tylenol may play a role, but I don't, and I think President Trump was kind of saying that too, talking in some degree about the mercury and aluminum and the shots and whatnot. But I think a lot of people, all they heard was Tylenol. What do you think?
What we've heard for so many years, really throughout our whole career, has been safe and effective, safe and effective, safe and effective. And clearly, the COVID era taught us that there is a massive problem, right? Our regulatory agencies are captured and are corrupt, and we have not been, receiving the truth from those agencies for who knows how long. So, I think that with the Tylenol question for autism is going to be a complicated, what we call multifactorial diagnosis, meaning that children will have different reasons for why they present as being on the autistic spectrum. But if we can help families, if we can help these children by identifying some of their categories of why they have this problem and then preventing that, wow, doesn't that give just a huge amount of hope to families moving forward? This has been a condition that has been just classified as, well, we can't really do anything about it. but we can treat symptoms, so we can help with the behavioral parts of it or things like that. This is huge. So Tylenol may or may not be a large reason. We need to figure that out. We need to study that. We have to remember that when pregnant women take Tylenol during pregnancy, they usually take it in the context of, having some shots too. So they kind of go hand in hand. So which one is it? Is it both? Is it one? Is it the other? Is it none of them? We need to understand that much better and look at the data.
This video here is kind of going viral today. Let me know your thoughts on this.
It's going to be 6 a.m. finally. And for those of you who don't follow me on Twitter, I recommend that you do. I got a call, a very frantic call at 4 o'clock in the morning from a husband whose wife is now dying of liver failure on a ventilator in an ICU because she was trying to prove that Tylenol doesn't cause autism because of what Trump said on the news. Mind you, that's a Harvard study. Now, whether or not you believe the Harvard study or not is not the issue here. The issue is that she's somewhere between 23 to 25 weeks and she overdosed on Tylenol and she's going to die. She's not going to come off that ventilator. And the guy got my phone number from somebody gave it to him. I mean, guys, it's early in the morning. I'm still in Hello Kitty sweatpants in my gym trying to work out. And she's going to die. It's going to be, let me tell you something about Tylenol overdosing and death, is that if you aren't administered the antidote, it is a very slow and painful death, okay? Because Tylenol, as well as Benadryl and aspirin, are the 3 most common OTCs that people will typically try to unalive themselves with, so I don't get censored. But now people are just taking massive amounts of Tylenol to prove Trump wrong. I mean, weren't these the same people who put Harvard and Fauci and the pillars of science on a pedestal? And now they refuse to believe it. Like, I don't believe it either. But I'm also not going to go overdose on Tylenol either. And it's just so sad because he has to make the choice of them going and trying to emergency deliver this baby. And the baby may not survive. The baby's going to spend a long time in the NICU. Hopefully the baby will survive. And remember, guys, preemies have complications even if they do survive.
All right, let's hold right there. What do you guys make of this? I mean, that's heartbreaking. Dr. Moon, first.
Yeah, our heartfelt sympathy to this family. What a tragedy, right? This whole nation has become so confused because we are being gaslit like mad. This poor woman on the video is using the term unalive rather than saying kill or... Where did this word unalive even come from?
I think she's trying to avoid the algorithms that will censor her.
I get that. But how did we come to this place where we're being so censored and we're taking it? How did we come to this place where we are so censored and we are taking it? This is ridiculous. The focus of all of us should be on what we need to do to create the healthiest children for our nation. How do we help our children thrive? And instead, our children are suffering because of this madness. This isn't a political issue. This is not a political issue. This is an issue of getting rid of the censorship, getting rid of the silencing of physician voices, everyday citizens, coming to the table, looking at the data that we have openly and honestly, without corruption from mainstream media, without corruption from the big pharmaceutical companies, and making the right decision for our children, the right recommendation.
What, Dr. Schreiner? I would point out that it points out that there is no medication that is completely safe. I mean, just because it's over the counter doesn't mean it doesn't have potential side effects. I try and teach when I have medical students or even parents that all medication is in some way toxic. And Tylenol, especially in overdoses, kills the liver. And so we've gotten to the place where we're treating symptoms way more than we should. And unfortunately, that's what we were taught in med school. This is the symptom, this is the medication that you use, rather than trying to get to what is the root cause. And really, there's a term that was coined back when I was in training, and that was fever phobia. And parents are just paranoid about fever, and it's part of the body's natural response to help fight infection, and we don't necessarily need to treat it.
Well, I do know.
Actually, I want to throw one more quick comment. One of the best things to bring down a child's fever, in my experience, honestly, is just tepid bath water. So just lukewarm bath water. It really does. It brings down a temperature really nicely. You don't have to bring a child's fever down to normal, because remember, the fever is there to fight the infection. It's your body's way of fighting the infection. So it's good. The fever is only a problem when the kids are absolutely miserable and it's, really high, right? But you can bring it down with lukewarm bath water, actually very, very nicely, when other substances like Tylenol and ibuprofen have failed to do that. So
I can't remember how many times. I mean, it was a lot. How many times my wife would send me out to the drugstore when we had our first child of the three. We have 6 kids, but 3 we lost in miscarriage. But of the 3 that were born, I can't tell you how many times I would go to the store to buy children's Tylenol, right? And she would tell me specifically which one to get, because she knew that particular our oldest firstborn wanted the grape, that he would take this grape, and he would have a high fever or fever, and he was teething or whatever was going on. And I'd run to the grocery store and I'd get the children's grape Tylenol with a little squeegee thing, the little dropper, eyedropper type thing, right? And we'd put it under his tongue or in his mouth and try to get him to take this, and he would. I'm thinking to myself now, did we give him too much? Do we have to worry that we somehow damaged him or any of our kids?
Well, I think they're fine, right? So the majority of kids are fine.
I don't know. Logan, are you fine, Logan? I don't know. This actually may have explained an awful lot this week.
I talked to him just a few minutes ago, and he sounded fine to me.
I think he's good. But what about that? What about kids with autism? Is it not only the moms taking it, but what about all the parents giving their children liquid children's Tylenol when they were infants and small kids?
I mean, it's hard to know and go back. We know that Tylenol, acetaminophen, depletes glutathione, and glutathione is a master, detoxifier. And so that's part of the theory, is that not so much that the acetaminophen is damaging, but you're removing part of the body's defense mechanism and then injecting things with things like aluminum that then are neurotoxic, and you depleted glutathione that would have possibly protected against it.
So combine the two, the vaccines plus the parents giving them the Tylenol, because the pediatrician has told us this is what we do.
Yeah, but what I find disturbing is out there you have the mainstream media, you have mainline doctors that are out there, sort of like the old cigarette days when they came out and defended the tobacco industry. We see the same thing, this knee-jerk reaction that there are no studies that show that it's not safe, when in reality, there's a lot of studies that have been around for a long time that show potential problems with acetaminophen.
I want to switch gears here a little bit, because you guys were, I know you, Dr. Moon, I think you lost your job over speaking truth, right?
Yeah, I lost my position as a professor at my medical school after speaking at a U.S. Senate hearing. I spoke as a private citizen at the Senate hearing, where I questioned why the COVID shots were being recommended for children. That's my point exactly here, is we have lost the ability to have scientific discussion and debate amongst one another. We've lost the ability for our regulatory agencies to do that. They're so locked down in this madness that they're actually putting out statements. I haven't verified this, but I have heard that the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology put out a firm statement saying, no, pregnant women should still receive Tylenol as much as they want. Something along those lines. They're still defending that stance. It's like you were saying, this is like with past products, like with cigarette smoke, when everyone defended those cigarettes and said, oh, they're not causing a problem. When you do that, you're arguing against open discussion and debate, which is the very basis, the very foundation of medicine and science. How can anyone be against that? There are studies out of Harvard, studies out of, I believe, Johns Hopkins and other, large institutions with concerns with the studies and what the effects might be. So we need to figure this out. This is not something that we just, throw out and ignore. But I think it speaks to how censored we've all been.
And you want to talk about being censored. I hate to say it, but I think that was just a test run.
Yeah.
I think there's more coming. And I started my broadcast tonight with this. In my book in 1995, I was warning about the certificates of mastery that were being given in the schools, that Lamar Alexander, the Secretary of Education for George H. Bush, was talking about how the schools would be open in the morning till late at night, involve babies. And if you lost your job, the government would tell you what job you should get based on the supply and demand of the workforce and train you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I warned in that book that eventually to have your professional license, whether it's a doctor, lawyer, electrician, plumber, any kind of professional license you have, if you don't go through this continuing education that is going to involve more and more effective objectives, attitudes, values, feelings, and beliefs, you're going to lose your license and you're not going to have your license renewed, your professional license. And I know for a fact of people on all walks of life, including a relative that's an attorney, that had to go through this kind of training in Minnesota to get their law license renewed. And they particularly wanted them to go through homosexual sensitivity training, or their law license would not be renewed to get their license, okay? And I began to warn in my book in 95 that all of the parents who think that this certificate of mastery for your kids is only for you, for them, it's not. This is going to be for everybody across the board. And Governor Roy Romer of Colorado back in the 90s, I have him on video, is the chairman of the Goals 2000 committee for the governors, said if you don't get one of these certificates, there'll be no job for you, there'll be no life for you. And yet, yesterday, I guess it was yesterday or earlier this morning, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, Keir Starmer, came out and said this.
And that is why today I am announcing this government will make a new free of charge digital ID mandatory for the right to work by the end of this Parliament. Let me spell that out. You will not be able to work in the United Kingdom if you do not have digital ID. It's as simple as that. Because decent, pragmatic, fair-minded people, they want us to tackle the issues that they see around them. And of course, the truth is, we won't solve our problems if we don't also take on the root causes, looking upstream to tackle poverty, conflict.
So we created the poverty from monetizing the debts, creating money, stealing the majority of the people's wealth through monetization. And we opened the floodgates. We let in all these thugs and criminals and people that didn't want to assimilate. So there's crime. And now we want to, after we've created the crisis, offer the solutions. So you're all going to have to get a government digital ID to get a job. This is what I warned about in that book in 1995 and on radio shows and TV shows and documentaries. And sadly, when I tried warning pro-family groups, pastor groups, most of them thought it was all conspiracy theory. Let me tell you something. If you thought going after you guys was pretty easy, wait until they just turn off your digital ID and you can't get online. You can't get on social media. You cannot travel because they're telling us since 2018 that's what they want. And now they're telling us openly in the UK that that's what's going to happen. What's about to happen to doctors, broadcasters, Christians, businessmen, people that love liberty and freedom and the Lord, they cannot begin to imagine what's going to happen. But literally, the elite were telling us this back in the early 90s, actually further back. I have quotes going back to the 60s in my books where the Department of like Education and Welfare, and Alan Banks, if I remember correctly, during the Carter administration, during the 60s, and then moving into the Carter administration even more aggressively. But in the 60s, they were talking about opening a database that would track kids and even write prescriptions for the family to fix their areas. We've had decades to get ready for this. And I think what you guys encountered it was only a small taste, and it's going to be a lot easier when they can turn off your digital ID, Dr. Schreiner.
Oh, I agree. I mean, during COVID, the American boards of pediatrics, internal medicine, and family practice all got together and put out a single letter to all of their board, or not board members, but members that were certified by them, saying, if you are doing misinformation, malinformation, and they didn't define those regarding COVID, then we could take your board certification, which for a lot of physicians, if they're participating in insurance companies, that means the insurance companies will no longer reimburse them. And so they threatened us that way. You add a digital ID, and who knows, they could cut off our ability to prescribe medications. Looks like it's sounding more and more like Revelation, where no one will be able to buy or sell unless they have the mark of the Antichrist. I mean, we're getting close to that.
Indeed, we are. Dr. Moon, your thoughts in closing?
Yeah, my family fled from this. They fled from communism behind the Iron Curtain, where they had to do whatever job they were told to do by the government, where the government injected the children with whatever they wanted to inject them with without parental consent. They literally fled from hell. But I'm going to be very strange and say that the system that is descending down over all of our heads right now, to me, is even worse than the one that my family fled from. And the one they fled from was absolute hell, because this system is tighter. It has computers to really carefully watch and monitor everything that we all do. And they're coming after our nation's kids. So this is really quite terrifying and surreal to watch it playing out in real time. But it is happening, and we need to fight this with everything that we have. This mastery, the certificate of mastery that you mentioned, it would be a certificate of going along with their safe and effective, slogan, with doing whatever they tell you to do, and not at all based on evidence or any sort of scientific data, but just whatever they tell you to do. So it's all propaganda based, and we won't be able to get out of this system if it fully comes down around us. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is actually happening.
It is happening. All right, Dr. Moon, you can find her and Dr. Thorpe on 2 docs on the weekends, worldviewtube.com/TWODOCS, worldviewtube.com/2 docs. Dr. Schreiner, are you where people can find you on social media or anything?
That's my practice that I'm in with 2 other physicians, blackbagdoc.com.
Blackbagdoc.com. Blackbagdoc.com. And do you have a website, Dr. Moon?
I don't really. I have, I do have, silentmajorityfoundation.org. That's my legal team. I have a legal team. We're fighting for all of us in the courts for your freedom to speak. So silentmajorityfoundation.org. Go to our work and go to freedom of speech, and you'll find a web page with my name on it.
Excellent. Look forward to having you guys back for our next visit. Thanks for making time for us tonight.
Thank you for all you do.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. All right, guys, great interview, great information. Be vigilant. All right, we'll be right back. All right, guys, that's our broadcast for tonight. If you appreciate what we're doing, we need your support. Worldviewfoundation.com. Roll the music, guys. A week from the night is our National Worldview Weekend. You can still join us in person. Worldviewstore.com. Worldviewstore.com, including our Thursday night banquet and concert. If you can't join us in person, you can live stream it by simply going and joining our vault, worldviewtube.com/vault, worldviewtube.com/vault. Now, I will not have my normal Bible study this Sunday night because I got to study for my keynote presentation for next weekend. So we'll run a best of. Thanks for watching. Till next time, may God save America. Take care.
Faith, spiritual values, moral issues, government, economy, education, work, responsibility. What we think about these depends on our worldview. Now, VCY America presents Worldview Radio with Brannon Howse.
And welcome. Glad you're with us. Benjamin Netanyahu speaking at the United Nations this morning. How many of you listened to that? Well, there are some concerns here. President Trump says he is not going to allow Israel to annex the West Bank. That's obviously the derogatory name for Judea and Samaria. Yet, President Trump now apparently has lifted the F-35 ban on Turkey, one of the nations that eventually the Bible tells us is going to be a part of a coalition that comes against Israel. You know what, guys? The issue